incidentally, Phil Hare has been helping the Planning and Zoning Commission over the past several months to work on the site plan, and he is our consultant, the borough's consultant, with regard to Clearview's development project. We asked him to come on board when, rather late in the discussions, an offer was made by Clearview generously to give the Foundry building, essentially give it to the borough for the cost of interior renovations. The reason Phil was asked to come along was to put that in the context of our existing plan, which was, as you recall, to move the fire department into its new facilities, move the highway department downstairs, and then use the proceeds of that to upgrade the borough hall. This new offer of Clearview's sort of threw a new element into our consideration. So we asked Phil to come on. He's familiar with the overall project. He's familiar with the borough. And he's done some work touring the sites and interviewing all the heads of departments in various capacities within borough government to determine our current needs, our projected needs, and what might be some choices for us to make here. So without further delay, I will introduce Phil Hare, and he will lead us through the findings he's made. It's really not a conclusion, as you'll see. He's essentially laid out the facts as they are, and then we'll entertain public discussion about where that leads us.
I think that's right. I was certainly not brought on, nor would I have agreed to come on to try to tell you what you ought to do. Really, all that my charge was to gather together stuff and to help facilitate a meeting such as this one. Here we are in the Borough Hall Fire Station. My understanding is that the borough has acquired this site up here for a fire station, and there is an option that shortly there will be a design for a fire station that will get built. They're vacating the space underneath here. And the notion, exactly as just has been said, was to take the operations that are now in the highway garage and move them into this building, and enabling that building to be sold.
Could you speak up a little bit? We really can't.
Okay, providing some revenue with which to make improvements to this building. Then came the option of using the building within the Clearview site, and the notion that was raised was, well, what if instead of keeping the borough functions here, they were to move to here, and with the fire department out and with the borough hall functions out, this building would become available. The highway garage would continue in the use that it is now in. And in addition to borough functions in the Foundry building, there would be it would be available with a space for a variety of community functions from time to time. Then yet another alternative got suggested, and that was, well, maybe it would be a good idea to do that earlier notion, that is to, when the fire department leaves, move these functions into here, but still acquire this, and have the borough manage it to have it available for community functions from time to time as they might demand it. What happens to that building if the borough does not acquire it is not certain. The initial preliminary response of the Planning and Zoning Commission was to a plan which indicated that that would be available for community use under some vague notions of how that would be. But that doesn't end of the story, and it could conceivably be in any of several other possible uses. So that's why we're here. And everybody should have a copy of the yellow-covered report. There have been some earlier versions of it that contained a variety of inaccuracies and so forth, so if you have old ones, forget it, but there's only one yellow one, and that's the real one, that's the one that we're going to walk through today. This then indicates, we have a status quo set, we have the Borough Hall, at the Highway Garage, we have the Star Foundry Building. Under the status quo, the borough offices, the fire department are in the Borough Hall, the Highway Garage has the Highway Department, American Legion. So the Foundry Building is vacant. The status quo is not going to continue. My understanding is that that simply doesn't work for the fire department, and it doesn't work for the Clearview people. So that we can't choose the status quo. That's just where we start from. There are now three alternatives that we've looked at. The first of which, as I just said, the Borough Hall would now become these functions would move over here. Would be added to the borough office when the fire department vacant the space. And then this building could be sold, and the Foundry Building would be in some private use. It might be private use available for community activities, or it might be private use not available for community activities. An alternative to that would be the same use for the Borough Hall, same disposition of the Highway Garage, but in addition, rather than this being in private use, it would be acquired by the borough, and through that mechanism made available for community events. The third alternative that we have looked at says, no. Acquire the Foundry Building, have it available for community events, but also have the borough offices in it. Have the Highway Department of American Legion continue to occupy that building just as they do now, and then sell this building. And I guess the first question is whether those three alternatives exhaust the set of possibilities we ought to be looking at, or whether there is a fourth or a fifth alternative that should be considered. Anybody have? Yes?
Why can't we sell both buildings and move the two town trucks out with the ambulance, the town property there, and then we have more income, more revenue, and two taxable properties for us?
Could anyone respond to that? Is that a, should we, yes?
The highway, it's a borough highway department.
That's correct.
And it should stay in the borough. I think that's the first criteria.
Why?
Because that's where all the streets are swept, and that's where everything happens.
And they can't just come over the bridge? I mean,
Well,
we're
they
talking
could,
big
but-
bucks here if we can sell both buildings.
I don't think our first selectman would want that. Because I've asked him analogous questions, not particularly for those trucks, but for other things that he doesn't feel he should have as borough stuff.
Does the first selectman decide what the town is going to do unilaterally?
Seems to.
It's easy to write down a fourth alternative, alternative D. We're not going to be able to talk about it very exhaustively today.
I would make one comment about that, the ambulance facility is private. It's not a town, it's their own thing. It would, if it were to be considered, it would have to be agreeable to the ambulance people as well. They raise their own funds, they're a private organization, it's not a governmental.
Is that town, who owns
No,
the land?
they're private. It's,
The land under the ambulance building?
you know, I don't know the exact disposition. They may own it and allow them to lease it or have it for, $1 a year for all I know, but the facility is a private thing. And,
What about the town highway building?
well, that's the town. Again, I mean, we are our own municipality. The question, I think you get on the edge of discussing at that point what borough government is and what borough functions are, and you start blurring the line, and that would be very amenable to some people. They'd like to eliminate the highway department. In fact, they'd like to eliminate borough government and borough zoning and
No,
everything.
I'm not advocating that.
No, I
in
know.
any way. I'm just
That's why I
looking for a way
say-
to make some money.
We've tried to keep a distinction there, and I'm not closing it down as a possibility. I'm just saying that opens up a whole other range of issues.
But has that been explored now?
No, No, that has never even been suggested, combining with the ambulance.
It looks to me, when you look at the cost of the land in the borough and the cost of the land over there where the highway complex is, it certainly adds up in dollars and cents.
Mhm.
And we are taxpayers to the town. And we could perhaps even offer them money to rent space from them. If the ambulance has a facility on town-owned land, then why couldn't we have a facility on town-owned land?
Well, there's one thing, they didn't want us at all to use even that piece for the firehouse which is there. So why are we talking about the town thinking that they ever let us drop a few tools off over there? I mean, they don't want us on their land. Theirs is theirs and ours is
We
ours.
pay our taxes to the town.
Well, for something else.
For what? We're
Well,
paying.
you have to analyze what you pay your taxes for to the town. But, I mean, we can't, yeah, schools, whatever the, you know, what goes on in the town and what goes on in the borough. And they just, I don't think any selectman's gonna come in and say, sure, park your stuff over here, it's easier.
A phone call might
It's an option.
close this conversation, but we've got it up. Are there any other alternatives that we haven't thought of yet?
Has the Stonington Historical Society considered taking over the Stone Foundry building?
Yes, I've had discussions with Michael Davis, and Michael Blair, as it turns out, but they feel as though they are as committed to projects and facilities as they can be right now and would not have an interest in that. I don't know if that's a final official response from their board, but that is the message I got from Mr. Davis.
I don't think it's been discussed in the board.
Okay.
Any more alternatives that deserve consideration? This will, I guess, get considered at least somewhat, but we're not going to be able to give it full justice because we haven't seriously looked at it. These are the things that seemed to be important to consider in thinking about what scheme was a good scheme and what scheme was not that good. The question of space, the question of the quality of facilities, the fiscal consequences, and some other things. With regard to space, there's the question of a hall like this. What kind of dimension of space of this kind would be available in each instance? There's the question of office space. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the borough offices downstairs. They're something short of grand.
Singular. I should count the men's room.
Well, no, but I mean, there's many officials' office there.
That's
So
true.
that if you define it in terms of the officers, its office is plural. And then finally, what kind of garage space is made available for accommodation of equipment. Concern over the quality of the facilities that come out as a result of all this for the borough, for the highway department, and for those various community activities. Concern over net capital costs. There's both capital gain from sale of real estate and the capital expenses involved in each case. There would be differences among them with regard to operating costs. There might be some differences that one could identify in the tax revenue that the town would earn over time in the surrounding area as a result of the change in the facility, which would have something to do with it. And then you tot all that up and consider what that overall means. The final area that we looked at was the question of accessibility. How convenient is it for borough citizens to access their borough government? One of the things which people immediately picked up on as a benefit of the use of the Foundry building was that it provided a nice vehicle for activity that would be participated in by people who were not resident or have offices within that complex. It would bring borough people into and out of that complex. It was a way of opening it in addition to the several other ways in which it would go to the borough in a way that they might provide a benefit. And then the final one is the contextual consequence of it. When you take the fire department out of here, you change the availability of parking on the street out here. If this building becomes changed in some way to be wonderful, then it has a wonderful impact all around it. If it gets changed in a way that is negative, it has a negative impact all around it. And so those kinds of contextual change seem important to consider. So those are the things that we've sort of put into these tables. Are there things in addition to those that you think we ought to look at? You start off by saying we're looking at alternatives. Now the question is, are we looking at the right things about those alternatives? Or a topic that we seem to have missed? Yes?
I don't really have a picture of what this building, the Clearview building is, what it looks like, how big is it?
Yeah. We will be talking about that as we go along.
Okay, all right, fine.
Yep. Oh, we should all go for a tour.
Be an excellent idea.
And let's assume, at least for the moment, that these are the appropriate set of things to have been looking at. And what we're going to start doing is to walk down through them. And I guess I really want to, I was described as being familiar with the borough and familiar with Clearview. And those who know me better know that I'm not. I'm really a stranger. I got a little bit lost because I got here 15 minutes earlier and decided to explore and went to places I've never been before. So I'm going to be looking for your thoughts and suggestions. The function of this meeting today is to sort of, in a sense, ferret out what's really right in these things. And I'm going through the report, essentially in the same sequence that it is presented, in focusing on two tables that are at the very end of it that try to summarize all of this, and they do it. Again, these now are, all of that up there says describing the three alternatives. This one here has within it a couple of variations. One of which is the borough might take that borough building and, take the foundry building and fix it up inside just how it is. And the amount of space that you would have is the amount of space it has. The Clearview people have examined a series of alternatives for that structure that have involved building a mezzanine that would create additional space on a higher level. The building is high enough to accommodate that. Or bumping out the building this way or bumping out the building that way. There's a number of ways in which it could be made bigger. And so we've considered it two ways. One is just the way it is, and the second is having expanded it a modest amount, without, for the moment, trying to settle how or where exactly what the area of that would be. This then is simply looking at the question of the amount of space that would be available. If you retain the borough office functions and meeting functions in this building, as each of these does, you get the space that you have here, which is about 1,300 square feet. If you take the foundry building and don't add anything to it, but try to accommodate a substantial amount of office space on that same floor, you probably, if we understand it correctly, can have about the same amount of floor area. So that if you compare the alternatives of the two alternatives that involve keeping that function here and moving into the foundry building without expanding it, there's no difference in the amount of hall space. They're all pretty close to the same. You could, however, get a larger hall. If you were to accommodate the office space on the mezzanine, or if you were to accommodate the office space by bumping out one or two dimensions on the ground plan, which the site plan would accommodate, then you could have a hall that is quite substantially larger than this. Now, how important is that? Well, my understanding is from time to time, this hall does not accommodate the size of meeting that happens. So on those occasions, that would be important. Maybe you could have some kinds of events that that you now can't have. It's not for me to weigh that, but that's a distinction between this sub-alternative and any of the others. With regard to borough office space, the space downstairs is kind of funny shaped. It depends exactly what you count as floor area, but it's on the order of 300 feet or so. You get a good bit more than that. These three spaces over here would become available in either of these alternatives. One of them presumably would be for the American Legion, or the American Legion would be accommodated somewhere else. But there's a net addition of some space over there. Some of this could be better used. There are schemes that have been drawn in a preliminary way showing an elevator to deal with access and substantially improving the space. So that the amount of borough office space could be substantially improved relative to the status quo. Obviously the same in each of those two cases. And it's a little bit arbitrary, because if you're trading how much office space versus how much hall space, but we simply showed it indicating that, well, with a hall space the same as this, you would have more office space in the Foundry building than you would staying here. With regard to garage space, the highway department would occupy the space on the ground floor that the fire department is now in, and it's apparently about 1,600 square feet, as against about 1,200 square feet where they are now. That's not a huge difference, but it is the difference of a major piece of equipment. As I understand, part of what's going on here, if they remain where they are, they can't add equipment they don't now have, such as a backhoe. And if they can't add equipment that they don't have now, such as a backhoe, that limits the things which they can do as opposed to contracting out. So that's one of the considerations in this alternative. They get no more garage space than they have now. In those other two, they get a significant addition. Anybody want to add or correct with regard to space? Yes.
How about space allotted for parking for the use of such facilities?
Didn't look at parking at all. There's no parking here. There's no parking at the highway department. There is parking on the Fairview site. The terms for that are very complicated. I didn't look at that. Maybe we should.
In the offer from Fairview, have there been any restrictions put forth regarding use and coverage and so forth on the offer?
Maybe somebody else can respond better. What I have gathered from the exchanges, some of which have happened after the Planning and Zoning Commission's opinion, I keep forgetting that word, opinion on it, is that they would be amenable to expansion of the Foundry building to at least some degree, as they have shown it in some of their sketches. That would continue to work, and they're not opposed to that. That would be at the borough stuff, that would be at their cost. They are clear that they would not want functions there that would be inconsistent with the character of their development. They don't view borough government as inconsistent. They don't view various community activities as being inconsistent, but I suspect they would consider a highway department as inconsistent.
I think one of the chief concerns was the hours of operation and how late any function or event might take place down there in that scenario. That goes without saying.
Yes.
When we were all asked what our sort of wish list would be for that property, the Monsanto property, a lot of people said that they wanted a great big meeting space or a place where there could be a reception, a party, a wedding, or whatever. But if that hall is